Hello and welcome back to class. In today's tutorial and demonstration video, we are going to be tackling the topic of image transfer techniques. In this video, we are really going to be diving into three main techniques about how to transfer images onto other types of matrices or mediums. Those three techniques are going to be a tape transfer technique, a acrylic transfer technique, and an acrylic skin transfer technique. You will need a variety of different materials to complete these type of methods of working, but image transfer techniques can be widely used in a variety of different mixed media paintings and drawings and anywhere in between that space. So I highly encourage you to try out these processes, to use these in your own artistic practices, and really learn how to have fun and play with images, image transferring, and to learn how to draw, paint, and incorporate them into your own practice. So let's go ahead and dive into our first image transfer technique.
All right, so we're going to start with the tape transfer process. So what you're going to need is actually some pretty basic materials for this project. You're going to basically need a kind of packaging tape to complete this process. You're going to also need some images to work with, some cutting utensils such as a cutting mat, aka this beautiful thing right here, a fresh X-Acto blade with a new changed blade in it, or some extra blades on the side with your X-Acto knife. A burnishing tool. This can either be a type of actual burnishing tool or a dull spoon, such as a wooden spoon would work best if you don't have an actual burnishing tool. You're also going to need some type of ruler and or some scissors for cutting. So please make sure you gather all those materials, have them ready, and let's go ahead and demonstrate this method. So to begin, I'm going to go ahead and actually select an image to work with. I've got quite a bit of really great images here that I've just pulled out from old books or magazines that I've collected over the years, and just found images that I really like or I'm attracted to. So that's going to be a great place to start. I've actually kind of found a small little example that I actually want to transfer. Particularly, I want to transfer maybe this kind of section of this kind of Earth atmosphere right here. So this is actually going to be the nice width of my tape. So I'm going to demonstrate how to create one transfer and then also how to gather a larger segment of image using a layering technique with our tape. It's going to be pretty simple and pretty straightforward. So let's go ahead and kind of dive in. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move some images out of the frame here, and I'm actually going to cut this little piece of paper down to a more reasonable size. So I'm just using my scissors here, and I'm just cutting this image out of the page now. And like I said, you can grab much larger images and just layer the tape. I'm going to demonstrate that a little bit later on so you can have an idea about how to layer. But that's just going to be our general process. For images, you can grab just about any image from any type of paper or print or image source that you can find just about to do this transferring method. And that's the really great thing about these transfer methods is that they're pretty flexible, they're pretty easy to use, and they can really work with a wide variety of different types of printed media and media sources. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and transfer this little image. So I'm going to pull out some tape, and I'm actually going to set this down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to begin with trying to set the tape down on the back side first, and then I'm going to push it down with my finger. So what I'm essentially doing is just connecting the tape on the edge, and then I'm going to slowly just work my fingers towards the outside so I can create less air bubbles and less pockets. So as you can see, this part of the tape has not stuck to the actual image yet. So I'm just going to go along and just kind of work my thumb from the center point out towards the corner edges. And what this is doing, this is ensuring that the tape is not only securing to the image, but it's also securing without air bubbles. And that's the big goal here because you really don't want to have any air bubbles in your actual tape transfer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and actually layer this because this isn't quite as wide as I thought. So to layer tape, it's going to be pretty easy. You're just going to essentially stack the tape one on top of another. I'm actually creating maybe about a 1/4 inch of a difference of overlap here on my tape layers. So once again, I'm going to complete that process. I'm going to work from the center point, working out towards the edge of the image. All right, and I'm just going to go ahead and remove some of this extra tape. So essentially what we're doing here is we're actually creating a laminated image. So we're laminating this image by this tape. And that is what's going to create our kind of skin transfer. It's going to be a tape transfer because we're literally going to transfer this image over to the tape. So we've almost got this part of the process complete. Like I said, I'm just going to go ahead and trim this tape down. You want to make sure that you don't cut too far into your paper, but rather you just kind of cut up right to that edge. You can really do this is a really like kind of lo-fi way to transfer an image. It's really affordable, it's really cheap, and it's pretty easy to do, and there's not like that many crafting things or steps that you have to really worry about. All right, so as you can see, I've got my tape on the image. It's fully secured. There's no air bubbles because once again, I kind of stuck it to the tape or to the image in this center point, and then essentially I worked out from those edge points, working my thumb all the way across the image to make sure that this was fully secured. So now what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm actually going to take my burnishing tool. Now, if you don't have a burnishing tool, what you can do is you can actually grab a wooden spoon that you might have in your kitchen, or you can grab maybe even a metal spoon. I'm going to recommend working with a wooden spoon just because they're a little bit easier to control and it's not as abrasive. Often I find when I'm working with a metal spoon that I have actually kind of scuffed the exterior of the tape. And since this is going to be the top image of our transfer and the kind of final result, we want to make sure that we maintain a nice smooth surface aesthetic. So as you can see, it's got this really nice kind of glossy sheen to it, and we want to make sure that that kind of consistency and quality of the tape is maintained. So we don't want to have a lot of harsh abrasions. But what essentially you're going to do is you're going to just put, essentially grab it, tuck it into your palm like this. You're going to put your thumb on the outside, tuck it like here, and then have your two main fingers here, both your index finger and your middle finger, and just push heavily and work in a rotation. So I'm just circling back and forth now, and I'm just kind of creating a really strong, secured kind of application here on the surface of the tape to my actual image. The reason you want to do this is primarily to make sure that your tape is fully stuck to your image so that there's no air pockets or even light kind of air pockets, that all of the glue and adhesive that's on the tape is fully attached to the actual paper surface. This is going to create and allow for a better quality transfer in the future. So you can simply just keep on with this method, doing slight rotations as I mentioned, and make sure that you really focus on those edges and corners and then work really evenly. It might even be good, especially if you're working with a really wide kind of brush, or not brush, but a spoon head like this, to go over it multiple times. I end up finding that instead of working at an angle like this, I end up flattening out my spoon just because there's a flatter surface here. So it's really going to depend on your kind of arch of the spoon that you have. It might work better to work right kind of on that kind of edge or tip or side of the spoon, or it might be better to work a little bit more in a flat kind of direction. So I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that I'm really securing my image to my tape. The second really important reason is because we want to make sure that we're having a really nice secure image and there's no air bubbles. All right, now as I mentioned, air bubbles, we're going to make sure that we don't want to have those from the beginning, but we're really going to make sure that this is all totally pressed out. Also too, in this process, we're going to make sure that we're really flattening the image to secure it to the tape, but we're also kind of creating a strong application of that glue. Now we're really pressing it together. And you should be able to tell a little bit of image quality difference at this point because what we're doing now is really securing, like I said, that image to the tape. And you should be able to actually see the difference in quality. There shouldn't, before this had a little bit of grain to it, a little bit of like white texture that was just stippled in all over the image. And now that I've really went over this a couple of times with my burnishing tools and really secured my image to the tape, that grain is all gone, and now I'm just seeing a smooth, perfectly kind of transferred image. All right, now what we're going to do is move on to our second process of the transferring stage. So to do this, it's going to require us to get a large bowl of water. I prefer warm water. I think it works a little bit better for the transferring process. And for us to get our hands wet and essentially remove the paper pulp from the image on the back. So we're going to go ahead and grab some water and bring that into the image. All right, so we have our bowl of water right in the center of our frame here. This is about 100, 102 degrees, so it's pretty warm to touch. It's not, I would say, hot, but pretty warm, and it's really going to help loosen up these fibers. So what we're going to do is just simply submerge our image, just kind of face side down in the bowl. We're going to let this sit for maybe about 30 seconds. And really what this is doing is it's just allowing the paper pulp on the back of the image to get nice and wet and saturated. This is going to be, of course, a really important part of your burnishing. You're going to want to make sure that your image was really nice and well burnished before you submerge it. And we did create a laminated process. So what that means again is just we're taking that tape and securing it to an image, and then we're putting an extreme amount of pressure with our burnishing tools, whether that be a wooden spoon or our actual kind of bone folder that I have here that I use for bookmaking, and kind of secure that down to the image, to the tape. And that's, again, like I said, that's going to create that pressure and really secure that image to the adhesive side of the tape. So I am using a basic magazine or kind of book print page. So this is a nicer quality kind of printed page. It's got a higher pigmentation on the actual image and graphics. And the paper is pretty decent, but it's not too heavy. So this is going to be actually pretty nice to remove. So like I said, I would highly recommend any kind of magazines or articles. Really, any kind of printed image can work for this process. So it is a really affordable and easy process. So at this point, it's been about 30 seconds. I'm going to go ahead and lift up my image. At this point, you can probably see there's some crinkling happening. You'll also be able to feel a textural difference on your actual surface page. And what I'm going to start doing is I'm actually going to just take this in between my fingers and start rubbing with my thumb. And I'm going to move this back in and out of the water, inside and outside of the water, till I start lifting up that paper pulp. So you can just see this is one of those areas of lifting up the paper pulp. And then I'm just going to use both of my thumbs to massage the paper pulp away. Now you want to be really careful here. You don't want to overly massage it, but you do want to make sure that you're getting right down to the ink of the image. This is a very delicate part of the process, and to be perfectly honest, it takes some kind of experience to get the right hang of it. So I'm just removing now this first layer of the paper. Essentially, this is just the ink of the other side of the image. And remember, what we want is we want this part of the image. So I'm just going to go through and now remove that extra white paper pulp, and get down to the actual ink of the image. So like I said, this will take some time to get the hang of it, and you'll be able to tell that quality difference very shortly.
I'm going to go ahead and speed us up a little bit through this process. Remember just to work diligently, slowly removing the paper pulp from the image till you expose the ink on the surface of your tape. Remember, you don't want to push too hard, but you can erase some of the ink if you want to have a little bit more of those kind of ghosty, transparent marks. All right, now that my image is pretty much complete, all of the paper pulp has been removed to a sufficient degree for my standards, I'm going to go ahead and slow our video down and walk us through the next kind of steps and the kind of end result for this transfer process. So what you're going to do is you're just going to take your image, your transferred beautiful image, put it in between a paper towel. I'm currently cleaning my table because it got a little wet, and you're essentially just going to dry it off really well. As you see, I have a really high fidelity transferred image here. There is a little areas in the actual transfer where I probably went too aggressive with my fingertips, and I removed some of that atmosphere on the kind of image here, the atmosphere of the earth as it enters into space. You can see it right there. But at the same time, this can actually be an added benefit to you, especially with tape transfers. Tape transfers tend to be a little bit more ghosty in their application, especially when you do remove some of the ink like I did in that one area. Also, another added benefit to the tape transfer image is that it's easily cut down. In fact, all of the transfer methods that I'm going to show you here, you can go back into them, either cut them down, break them up into small chunks or sections or segments, paint on top of them, add other types of transparent images on top of them, or either incorporate other types of transfer methods on top of one another. So they can be really well layered. They can be worked back into. You can draw on top of them or continue to go back and layer. Now, since I already technically showed you how to laminate or create a larger kind of transfer image, since technically my tape wasn't as large as large to fit the image as I thought. I ended up doing a small little section over there on the left-hand side. So you can actually see a little bit of that tape overlap. So I'm going to pretty much end this kind of segment and just kind of show you kind of the end result here on a white piece of paper. This is a really beautiful transfer technique. It is probably one of the most affordable transfer techniques. It's really easy and it's user-friendly, and there's not a lot of errors that can happen here. So I highly recommend you trying this. Have fun, and we'll move on to our next transfer process.
The next process that I'm going to demonstrate is going to be a acrylic transfer. An acrylic transfer is essentially going to rely on either white acrylic paint or a medium of acrylic paint to transfer said image to a piece of paper or a substrate like a wood panel or even a canvas. So this is going to be a really great process. Like I said, you can kind of use a variety of different acrylic mediums or acrylic paints, such as a white acrylic paint, to make this transfer process happen. So I'm going to go ahead and just show you this process, and I'm going to walk you through it. We are going to need some water eventually, so just keep that in mind. Make sure that you have that bowl handy. You do have some warm water that you can access readily, just to help lift up that paper pulp. So let's go ahead and dive into our second acrylic transfer process, or printmaking paper, something along that line. So I'm going to be using a gloss medium. You can also use a matte medium for this, or white acrylic paint for this particular process. The reason I'm going to use my gloss medium is just that I have an abundance of it right now, and I also think that I just like how this turns out a little bit better. I've had a lot of success with particularly gloss mediums, so that's kind of my favorite in terms of my transfer processes and methods that I use. This one is a really great medium. The medium that I am specifically using today, I do put it in this nice little charming container for us, just so it's a little bit more easy for me to use. But the gloss medium that I end up using is a Nova Color brand. Nova Color is a brand that comes out of California. I usually buy these large gallon versions of it. I buy specifically the gloss medium and varnish. This is kind of a mixing coat as well as a top coat medium. It's a really strong coat. It's extremely tough. It has a really strong polymer. You can work thinly with it, and it really does work absolutely wonderful with the transfer process, and that's why I really kind of focus on my gloss medium for this. So, all right, let's go ahead and dive into it. We're going to first start by selecting an image. So I'm going to go through here and just find an image that I want to transfer. All right. So I'm going to go with this image right here. It's actually got a little bit of crease in it, it looks like. So it got damaged, it looks like, over the years. But I'm still going to use it, and I still think we're going to see how this one turns out. So I'm just going to go ahead and start by taking my scissors and actually cutting this image out of the paper. And I'm just going to work right along the edges here. All right, so I have my cutout image here. It's just cut all the way down to the sides, and what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to actually make this transfer method onto a piece of paper of Arches cover. So I'm just actually going to grab a old sketchbook here, and I'm just going to work on the back of it. Since I have plenty of sketchbooks around, this is just a watercolor paper pad that I have, so I'm actually just going to go ahead and use it for my mounting process. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take some old-fashioned blue painter's tape, and I'm going to secure my image to the board. All right. So the reason I'm doing this is just to make sure essentially my paper doesn't slide when I complete my transfer process, because that would be a really bad thing. And this will fit in there like that. So this isn't going to be totally matching, but that's totally fine. We're going to cut this image down anyways. So what I'm going to do now is essentially I'm going to take my matte medium, my gloss medium here, and I'm actually going to take a nice little brush here, and I'm going to apply a coat really evenly across my paper, and then I'm going to apply a coat evenly across my image. All right. So the reason we want to coat both sides of the paper and image is to help us secure a really strong bond between our paper substrate and our image itself. So this is going to do a variety of things. Like I said, it's going to create a really strong bond, but it's going to really help, especially when we go into the drying process and the burnishing process. We are going to have to burnish this just a little bit, but it's going to really help that application of the image, making sure that it's fully stuck to the page. Now, I'm also going over this with multiple coats. I'm not slathering it on, like gooping it up, but I am making a nice secure coat. As you notice too, I am working over the surface quite a bit right now. I'm going back and forth, essentially creating like T-strokes, right? Going horizontally up the or going vertically up the image, up and down, and then horizontally left to right across the image. The reason I'm doing that is I am really working in my medium to the paper. This is going to help saturate my paper with medium, also opening up the pores of the paper, so it's going to be more open to accepting our image and the ink on it. All right, so I have a really nice strong kind of paper here that has been well coated. It's starting to ripple a little bit, so that lets me know that it's pretty good and well now. Now I'm going to have to work a little bit quicker. This paper isn't as good as my Arches cover, so it's going to start rippling pretty much right away, as you can see. I'm going to just kind of really quickly work here and get all of my paper, all of the corners, especially the sides and corners, fully coated. All right, now I'm going to put my brush on the side, and then I'm going to actually apply my image. So now what I am doing is I'm actually going to just start in the center and then work out towards the edges. So I'm going to just take my thumb, and of course now my image is a little wet on the side, and I'm just going to work out. Remember, like I said, we really want to make sure that we have all of our images really well coated and really secured to the tape and paper, or rather to the paper itself. So I'm going along with a paper towel now and cleaning up some of that excess. The reason this is going to be important is because I'm going to put this under weight now. So you really want to make sure that you have a really clean area so you don't get any stickage happening between your book or your weight. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead with my nice clean and completely dried area. I'm going to go ahead and take my burnishing tool. I would recommend maybe working with a burnishing tool directly, or if you don't have a burnishing tool such as your bone folder like I'm working with, but working with the old credit card. And I'm going to simply work from the center and work down and then work up. And I'm going to go over this maybe 2 times. The reason I'm doing this is just really securing my image once again to my page. And remember, this is a very important step because you really want to make sure that contact is being met 100% on the image. So this is my old Visa card, right? So trash, huh? And I'm just going to go ahead and take it and work in the same process. Essentially, I'm just going to take my thumbs on the back and then my fingers on the top, and then essentially I'm just clearing all of that information, right? And really pushing down pretty heavily. And this is also going to help you get out all those air bubbles, okay? All right. So now that I've got a nice secured image, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go over my image once again, make sure there's no dampness, and then I'm going to put this under a lot of weight. So what I mean by a lot of weight is maybe 20 pounds, 30 pounds. Like I've got some of these books here. This is maybe, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15. I can't even show you, right? That's a lot of books. So I'm going to go ahead and put this under weight. I'm going to take this off camera and I'm going to let this dry. Now, some of the processes, including acrylic paint that I'm showing you. So this one, and then there's going to be an acrylic skin process. These are going to take a lot longer to make and to work with because they're going to include dry time. So for this, I'm going to go ahead and just move this off camera, and I'm going to let this dry for maybe about anywhere from 20 minutes to 2 hours. This is really going to depend on your particular location, specifically like the humidity in the room, how dry it is, how wet it is. Also, the temperature can play effect with dry time. So I would say the minimum that you might want to check it is maybe like 20 minutes, right? So, and that's kind of like in the dead of summer, right? And there's like no humidity. So, since we're in Wisconsin right now, and I would say maybe it's 45 degrees out, the humidity is kind of highish. I would say I'm going to check that in probably about 30 or 40 minutes. And I might even be a little bit more lenient with that, just check it in 40 minutes. So, I'm going to go ahead, let that dry, make sure that is compressed with a lot of weight. Like I said, anywhere from like 15 and up. You really want to make sure there's a strong contact between your image and the medium and the substrate that it's being pressed to. Now, once again, like I said, you can use this process with a variety of different substrates like paper that accepts water media, watercolor paper, printmaking paper, mixed media paper, or you can use wood panels or canvas, right? So either one is going to really work well. You want to make sure that you do have a good brush. Make sure you clean off your brush well. If you don't know how to clean off a brush well, what I would recommend doing is taking this over to your sink, wash it in cold water, use some good old Dawn dishwashing detergent or just some really good soap, and you're going to fully wash your bristle out fully, and then you're going to work all the way up into the fret of the brush. You can even grab the tip of your brush and rotate it like this to work in that soap to make sure that you're getting out all of the paint that's sitting up close to the fret of your brush. After you're done with that, rinse it thoroughly and then reshape your brush. You're going to reshape your brush by simply taking a paper towel and taking out all the excess water and just reshaping it by going back over it and simply putting it in the original alignment that it was in.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and rinse out my brush and clean it real good. I'm going to go ahead and let my image dry, like I said, anywhere between 20 to 40 minutes, just depending on my particular environment. This could take longer for you, so just be patient with it. Let's go ahead and turn over to the finished result and move on.
All right, so my image has been fully pressed. It is completely dry. It took me about, I'd say maybe 40 minutes for this to be completely dry. You can, of course, too, run a hair dryer over the top of it just to kind of help speed that process up when it's kind of partially dry. But the big thing with this is you really do want to make sure that that press is really on top of this that pretty much the whole entire time it's drying. So if you do want to speed the process up a little bit, you can probably maybe check it at the 20 or 30-minute mark and maybe hit it with a blow dryer real quick and then put it back under some weight for some an extended period of time. All right, so really the big key with this one is making sure once again that you're really burnishing this. You coat both sides of your image with that matte medium or acrylic paint, white acrylic paint, and then you really burnish it very well either with a credit card or a burnishing tool such as a bone folder. And then once again, you put a lot of weight on top. All right, so like I said, about 40 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and start taking this image off. Now, I am working on not the best board to do this, but it is like the one that I have lying around, so I'm using that. So I'm actually going to be applying water. I've just got some warm water over here. I've got my bowl off in the distance. It still has some paper pulp in it from my last venture. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lightly rub some water on the top of the surface of this image. So what this is going to do is it's going to start activating that paper. That paper, remember, has water on top. You're going to want to make sure too that you're being really sensitive if you have any exposed paper, that that's covered up with tape before you go ahead and soak the paper on top. Because remember, we're trying to lift off the paper pulp so we can reveal the image. And any transfer image, what you're doing is essentially you're transferring the ink of an image and you're removing the paper pulp. So what we're left with transfer images is just the ink alone, okay? There might be, like I said, a small residue of paper pulp, but really the goal is to try to remove as much paper pulp as you can possibly get. So this is a glossy paper, so this is going to take a little bit more time to kind of get wet and really sink in. What you can often do is maybe start at the corner and then roll back. What's the big kind of thing here is you want to make sure just maintaining good craft quality. You don't really want to use your nails, so whenever I'm kind of rolling back the paper like this, I'm making sure that I'm really mindful of my nail space and that I'm not removing paper. So you'll be able to actually get some good sheets off, and this is kind of like um, a satisfying thing, right? It's like you're able to rip off big chunks or sections. And this whole entire time, right, I'm adding water, as you can see on your board. I'm going to have to try to keep it a little bit cleaner here, not as messy, just so I don't ruin my board. Hindsight being 2020, you might want to do this on maybe not a cardboard backed board. You could use maybe glass or a wood board, or maybe even just a painted surface. You can work on top of a painted surface if you have a wooden board and you want to go back over it. All right. So this is going to be a really delicate process, like all of this. There's a sensibility here that you kind of got to get right off the bat. You'll start playing around with it, and the more you do it, the better you'll get. But essentially, you're just going to work with your thumbs in a type of rolling motion or a back and forth motion, either with your thumbs or fingers. If your hands do start to get fatigued, you can also work with a little bit of a non-abrasive paper towel surface and work in a rotating motion. I want to be careful or caution you here if you do this. Just make sure that you are using and going back over with your thumbs and fingers every now and then just to make sure that you're not removing too much information. At this point, I am going to start and switch over to another type of material such as a paper towel just so I can show you how that might look. Some images will transfer better with a tool, some images will transfer better with your hand. It's really going to just depend on that particular paper type. And that's kind of the fun thing about this process is you get a real intimate kind of experience with the actual image that you're transferring. And they're all different.
I'm going to go ahead and save us some time here and speed the video up again through this process. As you can see, I'm going back and forth and working with both my fingertips, thumb, and my paper towel here. I am applying quite a bit of water to the surface of my image and just trying to control it as best I can so I don't splatter it all over the place on my chipboard. As you can see, I am working in both rotational patterns, up and down and side to side motions to remove the remainder of the paper pulp on the image. As you can see, I am yielding higher results with the paper towel as my main tool towards the end here. So I'm pretty much working predominantly with my paper towel at the end or getting close to the finished result. It is important to note that if you are going to be working with a paper towel or a tool to remove paper pulp, you really want to make sure that it has a low surface abrasive quality. So meaning that you're working with a sponge that is really smooth and doesn't have a high texture on it, no grit, or if you work with paper towels, which I often do when removing paper pulp on my transfer images. I work with a paper towel brand that's known to be tough and durable, but doesn't have any pattern or texture on the surface, such as a Bravo brand or Viva paper towel. So I'm working with Bravo brand. It's a recycled paper towel, and I've just had a lot of wonderful results with them here lately, and it's really been quite useful in this process.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and say I am almost just about done with this. This is pretty much almost all the image now. There is a little bit of paper pulp that's still left on the surface. So what I might do or what I might recommend is that when this fully dries and completely uh, all the water completely dehydrates from the surface is what I might recommend doing is going over this again with a top coat of your gloss medium. This is going to just kind of create that glassier surface. It's just going to help hydrate and kind of reinvigorate that paper pulp fiber. So you can either remove the tape now or keep this on to do a top coat. As you can see, it's already starting to dull a little bit, so some of that white, the paper pulp that's just a little residual on there is still left. So what you can do is let it dry and then reactivate it once again with water and try to remove some of it, or you can just go back over with a top coat of your gloss medium to create a really nice sheen on top. Now, as I mentioned, this process can be done with either a gloss or matte medium. It can also be done with a white acrylic paint. So if you do have either one of those, feel free to use them. And remember, this process, like I said, can be done with white paint too. I just highly recommend working with a gloss medium because you'll also be able to do an acrylic skin transfer with a gloss medium. This gloss medium in particular, made by Nova Color, is just really wonderful. I've had a lot of success with it over the years, and I do recommend it for any types of transfer techniques, including the acrylic transfer technique that I just showed you here, and then moving into our third option, which is an acrylic skin transfer technique. All right, so you can go ahead and either remove your tape now, or if you want to go ahead and add a top coat, a gloss coat to the top of your image, feel free to go ahead and do that. The great process about this is that you do basically have paper that's still left here, so you can go back ahead and top of this, you can put drawings material on this. If you have ever worked with a product called Chalk Pastel Ground, it's a really great product. Essentially, it has an acrylic base to it, and then it has bits of a variety of different things really, but it's essentially got a pastel or like chalk to it. So it actually makes, if you paint it on, it'll actually add some kind of like aggregate and tooth to the surface, and pretty much it makes it like an active drawing ground. You can pretty much use a variety of different drawing mediums the to the surface of any of your images, and it's a really kind of lightly textured surface that's really durable. Of course, this is archival as well. You can go back and forth between adding both oil and acrylic paints on it, as well as, like I said, some variety of drawing tools just by adding chalk pastel ground. So you can add watercolor pencil, color pencil, and Conte chalk pastels, oil pastels, and even some color pencil on the top of this if you just coat it with an acrylic pastel ground. Acrylic pastel ground like this, if you buy this at any local crafting store or art store, will set you back maybe $10 anywhere. If you buy a larger golden product, larger canister, and a golden brand product like this is about $20. So give or take. So this will set you back some cash, but it is a good drawing product for those of you who are really serious about playing around with mixed media drawing, and even activating your transfer drawings and transfer images even further to the next step. All right, so this is going to go ahead and conclude step 2. So let's go ahead and move on to our third and final process, the acrylic skin transfer process. The third and final transfer process that I'm going to demonstrate today is the acrylic skin transfer process. Now, like the acrylic transferring process, this is going to require an acrylic base or foundation to be working with to create that transferred image. But unlike the transferred acrylic process that I just showed you for our second step or second transfer process, this is actually going to require you to use a acrylic medium that is clear. So what I mean by that is either a gloss or matte medium is going to be the only medium used for this transfer process. Now, in our second acrylic transfer process, I did say that you could use a white acrylic paint, and that is true. So you can use a white acrylic paint. Like I said, I just had the gloss medium, so this is what I primarily use, and I like it because it's so sticky and it really does have a high transfer rate success for me. So I end up just using my gloss medium for all of my transfers that require acrylic paint. But for this particular transfer process, you will need a clear matte medium or a clear gloss medium. Essentially, what a medium is for acrylics is just a acrylic body without the pigment. So, like I said, I'm going to be using my Nova Paint or Nova Color gloss medium to make this transfer process. You will need to find an image that you want to transfer, just like everything else we've been doing. I'm going to go ahead and pick an image here that I want to transfer and go ahead and demonstrate this process. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab a second mat. Essentially, this is just a big moleskin journal that I have. Sometimes I use this for a board, so I'm going to go ahead and use this as my board. You're also going to need some blue painter's tape. Go ahead and rip off some blue painter's tape and secure your image to your board. I'm going to once again just kind of have a rough estimation of about a 1/4 of an inch border framing my image here. So I'm going to go ahead and just load my brush up with material, and I'm just going to start applying it. Now, as I mentioned, I am working with a gloss medium. I prefer the gloss with this paper just because I think it has a little bit more stick or stickage. Those are fancy words, I know. But I do think that there is a difference between a matte and a gloss medium in terms of our transfer process and how well those transfers come out.
All right, so I am going to be working pretty rapidly here when I'm applying my first coat of acrylic medium. The reason you want to work quickly is primarily because this is not a watercolor paper or a paper that is used to accepting wet media. So it will start to ripple. That's not going to be anything to really be alarmed about, but you just don't want to overly saturate the paper, so you want it to have less wrinkles. It will wrinkle some, don't worry. It is taped down, so you won't have to worry about any long-term or damaging effects. So work quickly and apply one layer neatly to the page and you'll be set.
We're going to go ahead and let this dry. So I'm going to take this off screen. You want to wait maybe, like I said, 15 to 20 minutes in between layers. This is obviously going to fluctuate depending upon the humidity and the temperature in your room or working space. If you're working in a really humid environment, this could take a lot longer in between drying coats, anywhere from maybe 45 minutes to maybe an hour. If it's a lot less humid and it's more temperature controlled and regulated, this could take about 15 to 20 minutes to dry. Right now, I'm working in a pretty warm room. There's low humidity, so it's going to take me about 15 minutes to 20 minutes. Essentially, what I'm going to do to make sure that it is nice and ready for the second coat is I'm just going to lightly touch the surface. If it doesn't feel damp to the touch, that means it's dried and I'm going to go ahead and apply my second coat. So what you're going to do now, clean out your brush or put it in a little bit of water to keep it hydrated so that your paint doesn't dry. If you do keep it hydrated in a glass, just make sure that you clean off the excess materials before you dip it back into your matte medium, just so you're not adding extra water into your matte medium or your gloss medium, excuse me. So let's go ahead and let's start this process. In total, you're going to need about 5 to 6 coats for any type of acrylic skin process. 5 is kind of the minimum for me. That yields the best results for these. So I'm just going to leave you with that parting information and advice. You can always, of course, do more, but I would stick to 5 as an absolute minimum. Let's go ahead and we'll speed this process up and I will show you those coats as we go along.
Let's go ahead and speed this process up. In total, as I mentioned, you will be needing a minimum of 5 coats of evenly applied gloss medium or matte medium to the surface of your image. Now, what you can do to speed this process up too, if you're worried about time, or let's face it, you are busy, you have better things to do than wait for dry time. You can also hit this with some heat with just a basic blow dryer or hair dryer. So you want to work in between both a cool and a warm mode. So there should be a kind of option to just push the fan on the hair dryer and then of course going back up to your high heat. So go back and forth between a high and low heat to make sure that your acrylic doesn't get overly heated, but you are ensuring a consistent, even drying time and pursuing good craft in the process. So I'm going back and forth now with a hair dryer, going back and forth and just hitting this with some heat. It's probably taking me about 3 minutes to 4 minutes between each coat of dry time now with just hitting it and working with it hair dryer. So I highly recommend doing that. Just to speed you up during your dry time process. So if you're working on other projects, this also could be a good process for you to utilize because then you can utilize that dry time and work on projects or homework in between. So we're going to go ahead and get towards the end of the video here, and I will show you the end result where we see the final transfer image.
All right, so we're on our 5th and final layer, and I'm feeling like it's pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and talk about some crafting now. Sometimes if you notice that the layer overlap on the tape to the image is really thick, what you might want to do is go ahead and just lightly cut it. You're not going to fully cut it, but you're just going to kind of like go along the edge of the tape barrier and essentially just start to cut that edge of the acrylic a little bit. So this is just going to help in the tape removal process. And whenever doing this, you always want to make sure that you're working with your ruler and that your ruler is on the inside of the image. So if you make a hiccup or a mistake, you're not going to cut into your actual image. You're going to be cutting on the outside. So I'm just going through and just really lightly, I'm barely putting any pressure, or maybe medium pressure. All right. And then we have our acrylic transfer skin ready to be dunked in its warm bath and then all of that paper removed. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go on and continue a very similar process to our other tape transfers, acrylic transfers, and now our acrylic skin, as we're just going to submerge our image in a warm bath. So my image might not fit all of the way. Like I said, depending on the actual paper, you might just want to let this sit for anywhere from 20 seconds, 30 seconds, 40 seconds, really just depending upon your paper. You'll be able to feel when the paper starts accepting the water and it starts becoming a little bit more loose. Of course, you want to make sure that your acrylic skin before you submerge it is completely dry. This is a big, big key tip here. You do not want to start removing any paper pulp if your acrylic matrix and medium on the top of the image is not fully dried or secure, because that would be a little bit of disaster. So it's been probably about 15, maybe 20 seconds. I'm going to go ahead and just start slowly working this image off. So as you can see, it's actually transferring pretty well right off the bat. I actually just got a big chunk of paper off, so maybe this is older paper. I'm going to go ahead and work maybe on the inside. So this will take a few seconds, right, to kind of get that paper to loosen up, but I didn't like the way that just kind of chunked off there, so I'm going to go ahead and just slowly start removing this paper. It's going to help, like I said, to kind of work in that submersion and lifting process when removing paper. As you can see, I've got some of my old paper pulp in here too, so I'm just working with the same bowl and just refreshing the water. If you're worried about clogging your sinks, which I totally get, look at that. I'm just going to take that whole thing off. What I would recommend is working with a strainer. So simply just take your strainer and pour your remnants and water into that strainer. What you can also do too, if you cook with your strainer, you could just put a paper towel in the bottom, or a towel that you don't care about, like a dish towel or something, or a shop towel, and put that on top of the strainer, so then you can just either shake that towel off in the trash or dispose of the towel in the trash afterwards. Sometimes my students find that that method works a little bit better for them, just so they can reuse their strainer and their strainer doesn't get gunked. So either paper towel or a towel. I will warn you, if you do use like a terry cloth towel, you will have a total nightmare on your hands, so I wouldn't recommend using a terry cloth towel. This is like those really thin cotton towels that you use for cleaning in the kitchen. If anybody bakes, you'll know what I'm talking about. For bread, right? For helping rise. Those kind of towels. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start just slowly using my thumbs. And once again, I'm going to do that rolling technique. I'm actually pulling a little bit of this fiber now with my thumbs and just kind of rolling it off into these little rivulets. That's actually working pretty well, just because of the nature of this paper. I think this is an older image, and I don't know what kind of paper they use, but it's coming off pretty easy for me. So. All right, I'm going to go ahead and speed this part of the video up because you essentially know what I'm doing here. So wait to see the final product when I'm finished. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take our paper towel and we're going to take our acrylic skin and we're going to go ahead and pat it down. Essentially, we're going to make sure that our acrylic skin isn't sticking together too much. I am working with a warmer. I did work with a warmer water, as I recommend. So sometimes your acrylic skin might stick together just a teensy bit. So go ahead and just pull it apart and get those corners nice and well. then go ahead and just pat it dry. Since it's been fully submerged and soaked, that acrylic body is going to seem foamy and kind of filmy for the first maybe 10 minutes of it. But it will begin to start to lighten up and become transparent once your acrylic has fully dehydrated. So that'll take just a few minutes. Ooh, got some stickage there. All right, I'm going to go ahead and let this dry. I'm going to go ahead and show you just an example image. This is one that I did last week in preparation for this video, just so I could show you the difference real quick. So once again, this is just the actual image that has been transferred. I went through the same exact process as I did this one. Like I said, it's a little bit filmy now in the camera, but it'll eventually come to the same type of clarity that you can see in this image on the left. It just needs some time for that acrylic to kind of settle back down and dehydrate fully. So don't worry, this will become as crystal clear as you were making it when you were doing all those layers. As you can see, I probably worked a little bit too heavily on this bottom section, so I did have a little area that popped up, or some areas of the image that did transfer totally perfectly fine on the bottom. But that's okay. I can end up working over top of it or doing some interesting layers behind it. So there's a variety of different ways that I can problem solve this if you do have some areas where they don't transfer 100%. I always like to play around with that kind of perfectness of a transferred image. Like I said, you can get them perfect if you're patient with them and working really slow. I didn't have any areas of mistakes in this one, and this one transferred 100% perfectly. So I just rushed this one a little bit, probably because I was demoing it. But like I said, sometimes too, that these kind of areas where the image kind of fades or dissolves away could actually be a really nice sensibility, especially if you put images behind it, you put a drawing behind it, you work on top of it. And most of the time too, when you're working with these acrylic skins, they are going to be reworked or used in a mixed media kind of fashion. So there's most likely already going to be images that are affixed on top, drawn over, painted on top, images listed on bottom, or you put a chalk pastel ground on this and you redraw on top of it. So there's a variety of things that you can do after the fact that these are kind of made, and they can just be these really great little images that have flexibility, that have movability, and really can lend to a lot of wonderful and brilliant kind of problem solving solutions, mixed media solutions, and image quality results that you can play around with. So
this is going to take us to the end of our video here. So I hope you've learned a lot, and hopefully you will be able to utilize some of these, or at least one of these transfer techniques that I have demonstrated. So feel free to rewatch, stop or pause, go back and rewind and rewatch the video or work alongside me. I'm going to just switch gears here real quick and show you all three images in the same frame of the video, just to give you a better example of how these images look when they are fully lit. I just put an extra hot lamp over the images so you can see the full color saturation and the really amazing fidelity of image transfers that you actually can get with these three processes. And of course, that first process again is the tape transfer over on the left hand side. In the middle, we have got a acrylic transfer. And then on the far right, we have a acrylic skin transfer. All three of these can really yield different results and can be utilized with other types of transfer, collage, drawing, or painting practices and methods. As you can see, you can get some really beautiful results from them, high fidelity image transfers, and just really have some really incredible images to work with for mixed media drawings. So hopefully you've learned a lot. I hope you have enjoyed this video. Feel free to rewatch it, as I said. Otherwise, happy painting, happy drawing, happy collaging, and happy transferring.